Welcome to Healing Beyond the Trauma. My name is Megan Alves. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And this podcast, I want to break the stigma around mental health and have real, unfiltered conversations about healing. Some stories are going to be raw, even triggering at times, but they're real and they're honest because healing starts with honesty. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, stuck, or like you're carrying it all, you're not. Here, you're going to gain validation, practical tools, and a new perspective to move forward. Because healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming your future. So let's dive in. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Summit to Healing Beyond the Trauma. My name is Megan Alves. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Today, I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be doing a little solo episode. And the reason for this episode comes from a variety of spaces, but it is definitely a topic that oftentimes I get asked about in my clinical setting as well as in mentorship. And I'm going to just be honest and lay it out that it's also in my home as well. I'm a mom of two amazing boys, and they push the limits. And oftentimes I hear, "You're the professional. What do we do about this?" And not always do I show up in the professional space with all of the answers. I'm not an expert in this topic by any means, but today we're going to talk a little bit about navigating real life challenges of raising a teen today. In this episode, it's about what it's actually like when your kid seems fine on the surface, but is carrying a quiet pressure that keeps building. In our house, it's not anxiety attacks that shows up. It's not depression episodes that show up. It's risk-taking. It's impulse-driven decisions when the pressure gets to be too much. And as a parent, that can feel really confusing at times. It puts a lot of pressure on my husband and I, and we hear a lot of noise. So today's episode, I just want to quiet the noise for you. If you are a busy parent and maneuvering the current climate of parenthood in our day and age, I want you to take this moment for yourself. I invite you into this conversation. I'm not talking at you, I'm talking with you in this episode. And I want to cover a couple things that has helped me to navigate, as well as hundreds of my clients to navigate parenting in this 2020. So we're going to be talking today about youth mental health in a way that's rarely framed, not just what kids are feeling, but how it's showing up in their behavior. And what do we do about it? Right? That's the big question. What do we do? I, not too long ago, showed up on TikTok. It's not a space that I often show up on, trying to learn it. But I had a moment after my son did some boundary testing and really tested my husband and I. And I looked at my husband and I said, parenting is kind of like riding a roller coaster. If you've never been on the roller coaster before, you're not sure the turns and ups and downs and loops that it's going to take. And every once in a while, it feels like you have control and you're going in the right direction and it feels a little bit smooth. And then all of a sudden the wheel falls off on the right side and things are a little bit wonky. And then, you have that huge rupture of fear or whatever it may be. And then you repair it. And then it feels like it's back on track. And then the opposite side of that roller coaster wheel falls off and it just feels all over the place again. Or maybe you're in a season where two of the opposite wheels are off right now and you're not sure what turn is coming next. And so I just want to highlight that not every kid shows up in the same space. And I think that that's what's so important, is that we can realize that although some of the things I may mention today is what I'm experiencing or what my clients have experienced, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're experiencing it in the same way. So I want to give you an opportunity to just give yourself space when you're navigating the trenches of parenthood. Give yourself grace, because, oftentimes depression may show up as a child being quiet or withdrawn or sad or hopeless, but that's not all the time. They may show up in spaces with big emotions, maybe even defiance, maybe even overreacting to situations. And so it's often hard to see all of those red flags. And sometimes there's no flags at all. I've heard, from parents of kids who have survived or attempted suicide that they would have never guessed. And this is the struggle of parenthood, is that we, for the most part, especially if you're listening to this episode, we're showing up the best that we can. We're providing the best that we can to our kids for those of us that care. That really is what we're trying to do. And when ruptures happen, and psychologists will often say, ruptures within communication or within family dynamics are going to happen. I mean, if I hear from a parent that they've never had a rupture before, I'm going to question their honesty in the session, right? But the beautiful part about ruptures in parenthood and childhood and relationships is that they usually come with beautiful repair when we have the right tools to navigate them. And that's what I want to highlight today, not talking specific about, in the clinical field. And if you want more specifics in the clinical field, I have a website, mymentalsummit.com, that is dedicated to resources as well as a community of busy parents and entrepreneurs navigating life at its fullest right now, trying to still show up for themselves. So I will make sure to put some of those resources and where to find therapists and things like that in the resource tab of this episode. But what I want to also highlight, and some of the trends and some of the challenges right now, I read a study from a recent CDC study that is highlighting that 40% of our high schoolers right now report some type of persistent feeling of sadness or hopelessness. But here's the part I want to highlight, that not every kid, and I will repeat it again, are going to show up in quiet or withdrawn ways. At times will show up with defiance, risk-taking, pushing back limits as a way to cope. We're seeing a rise not just in emotional distress, but in behavior regulation issues. These kids aren't bad kids. They're overwhelmed kids, overwhelmed teens using tools they have. Impulse control, emotion reactivity, boundary testing are often misread as personality flaws. I know it's not their personality yet. I know that this is their way of navigating a world that has more pressure than most of us have seen before. And, parents, any sports parents out there know that these pressures are really serious. We're sometimes on the field 4 or 5 days a week, plus for practices, plus games. I have dance parents and volleyball parents who I don't even think get a day off at times. And then we have all of, the school activities and things that are coming up. So the overwhelm that I'm seeing on a consistent basis for not just the kids, but for the parents as well, is really serious, right? Like, it's there. And let's be real, our kids are growing up with these pressures we didn't experience in the same way. Some of us played sports, but oftentimes I hear my sports parents say, but I wasn't on the field 5, 6 days a week. I wasn't doing this. And the feeling of perfectionism. But then on top of that, the digital noise that we're hearing, they just can't escape. Our brains are not wired in this way to consistently perform out this way and show up in a capacity, for some of our teens showing up on social media. Us as adults, we show up in our perfect stages. It's not easy to show up in those vulnerable stages. Typically, social media platforms show the perfect side, and we want to share all the good things. And it's unrealistic, even as a clinical therapist, to ask you to show up in that capacity to be happy all the time. It's not a realistic expectation. For kids, even kids like mine, the pressure doesn't look like sadness or withdrawing. Sometimes it is, like I said, I'll repeat again, those pushing of those boundaries, or sometimes the pressure has been so much that they're staying up late just to help themselves decompress before they lay down. I've even heard my 13-year-old say that sometimes he lays down and the day was just so busy. And so he has learned how to navigate letting out some of those emotions. Sometimes that looks like making himself a snack before bed, but in that quiet space. Sometimes it looks like getting movement. So he is in our outside gym. And before we had a gym, it was like moving your body in one way, whether that be push ups, jumping jacks, whatever it may be, to just get out some of that energy. And, you know, um, as for us parents, it's exhausting when you're already stretched thin, having an emotional thermostat for yourself, showing up for jobs, or even just showing up for the kids, my stay at home parents. It's a 24/7 job. My working parents, it's a 24/7 job. And holding sometimes that emotional thermostat can feel a little bit impossible. But that's exactly when the tools like co-regulation come in. Megan, what's co-regulation? Co-regulation is learning how to sit with someone else to regulate your own emotions. And if us as parents do not have those tools, it's going to be pretty challenging for our teen to understand how to regulate emotions, especially co-regulate emotions, right? And so using those tools as a parent can help your teen decompress, learn tools how to navigate when they feel all of the pressure, or at the end of the day, be able to have that safe space to process in. I'll be honest here and vulnerable that I have learned how to have my alone time waking up at 4 a.m. so that I can get to the gym at 5 a.m. so that I'm back home by 6 a.m., waking the kids up for breakfast and then getting the whole day started. It's been pretty challenging because now at times my kids play football. We come home sometimes 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and that's when they want to talk. That's when they take the shower, they've let out so much of that energy, and they're ready to process their day, whatever that may be. It's not always, right? But in our home, that's typically the time. And we've had to learn how to become flexible, that if our kid has something to talk about, there's times that I can ask him to talk in the morning. I'll set my boundaries. But other times, creating that space for them to process and to learn the safe ways to ask questions in our home and us to explore those things has been those late night hours. Unfortunately, all day we've asked them, how was your day? Tell me what happened today. And it's short responses because they're overwhelmed, right? The day, the pressure, whatever it may be, was high. But at the end of the night, after that workout, they start to calm down. And my husband and I have learned that we've just got to be flexible during those nighttime hours. And sometimes that means that we don't get to go to the gym and wake up at 4 a.m. because sleep is important. And so it may mean that we take part of our workout that was planned that day and we do it in our garage. And it might not look the same of what we've expected for that day, but we know that we're showing up the best that we can for our kids, and then also showing up the best that we can for ourselves. And that modeling is really important. And we have open conversations and dialogues about that quite a bit in our home. And there's times that we might not have the capacity to process all the things that they've gone through the day because we've had a difficult day. But creating that space for you to learn how to decompress as the parent before the kids, as all the seasons change, right? Any parents out there know that these seasons are going to change. Sometimes they want to talk at night. Sometimes they want their alone time. Sometimes they want to talk early in the morning while you haven't had that first cup of coffee yet, and they're just on level 10. And being able to learn how to navigate that flexibility is one of the most important traits that we can learn for ourselves so that we can do what is called staying within our window of tolerance. So I want you to think about, if you're driving and not watching this, I want you to think about maybe a ruler. And I want you to think about the emotions that ebb and flow inside, lengthwise, like a wave going through and hitting the top and sometimes hitting the bottom of that ruler and learning how to just ride those waves of emotion within that window of tolerance. And sometimes that window of tolerance feels out of alignment and you're going up and outside of those boundaries or down below those boundaries as well. And that's when you got to check in with yourself, right? Use the tools to navigate. And I mean, I can go into hundreds of tools, but come join us in the Elevate membership. There's tools that you can access daily, weekly, new ones that are popping up depending on the questions that are being asked in the groups. But some of those tools is just learning how to ground, learning how to be mindful in the moments of chaos and stress, deep breathing, meditation, mindfulness, walks, movement, nutrition, good sleep. You don't have to encompass all of these things at once. We're not trying to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it, but learning small steps so that you can be flexible so that when stress is hitting, you know how to ride those waves of emotions with all the pressure that we have as parents, and going back to co-regulating and modeling self-control. When I see my son acting out or pushing boundaries, I remind myself he's not trying to make my life harder. There was many times that I would often think that my son's behaviors or my husband's behaviors or whoever's behaviors is targeted at me. But if I learn how to rewire and switch some of the thinking with that, I can often reframe that they're not out to get me, right? He's not just purposely doing all of these things. Yes, a lot of these behaviors can be reframed and he can be making better choices, whatever it may be. But if I can remind myself that he's trying to make sense of a world that feels overwhelming to him or that feels like there's a lot of pressure, then I can help with some of that impulse control and regulating through connection. Kids often mirror the nervous system cues of the adults around them. I mean, there's tons of studies out there and there's videos out there that you can watch about even as young as infancy, the way of an adult's voice tone or body language towards a child, the child picks up on those cues even before they're able to talk or walk. And so if we think about those imprints as our kids get older, they're picking up on those cues as well, whether we say them or not. I will often say, "Ooh, I need a timeout. I'm going to go take a few minutes." Even when my kids were younger, I would often tell them, "I'm going to go take a timeout. I just need 1 minute to take a deep breath so that I can calm down. I don't want to yell." Or big messes happen and I'm already at my capacity and overwhelmed and I've lost my emotion regulation a time or two. That's for sure. But as I've learned to implement the clinical tools and practice those clinical tools, then it is about taking breaks and not having to respond to the moment or being able to walk away and come right back. Now I often hear my kids say, "I just need some space." You got it. As long as you're safe, we have those ground rules. As long as you keep your door unlocked so that if you're in there a little bit too long, I can come and check on you. You're not punching, kicking, destroying things in my home. Space, you got it. That is easy. You get time to chill as a parent, taking a few deep breaths with whatever rupture might have happened, or your child gets to learn how to find a safe space for themselves to process maybe what has happened or the day before they come and talk to you. Because even as adults, we know that sometimes that's really hard to talk through and process through a situation until we're calm. And our nervous system really needs that regulation. And if our kids don't understand that nervous system dysregulation or how to name their emotions or how to calm dysregulated emotions, it's going to be really hard for them and for you and vice versa when it comes to raising children. So that means it's, our job isn't to control them. And I know I'll probably hear some backlash from this, and that's okay. I'm not, trying to say what's right, wrong, good, bad in this episode at all. I'm just trying to point out some of the things that have worked and hasn't worked for many people that in my clinical field, to myself, to, older or younger population. So really, if it means that it's not our job to control them, it's to show them when regulation and what regulation looks like, what calming our body looks like, what it looks like to give ourselves permission to not respond in that moment and just breathe and stay consistent. I will be the first to admit that I am not always consistent, that I set boundaries and I break those boundaries, and it is not the healthiest by any means, but I'm learning and I am doing my best. And getting curious without reacting in that moment, or being able to take a moment and go back to the drawing board and then have a conversation about it. First steps is to regulate myself. The second step is to stay close physically and emotionally, even when he's pushing back, right? I'm not going to leave him in the room forever. I'm not going to leave and go for a walk. I'm going to stay close, but I'm going to give that space, and I'm going to model decision making in opportunities that I can and narrate the process so that he can hear it. It doesn't mean that I have to show up perfectly every time, but staying as consistent as possible and doing the best that I can to model that is and has helped in many ways. Here's a few things that I've tried that have made a difference in my home and some of the things that I've heard in the clinical setting. One is to create pressure release outlets. What is that? It's structured downtime. I'm not good at relaxing. My husband's not good at relaxing. We weren't modeled very well what relaxing environments look like. So structured downtime, structured, calm physical activity, and even safe places to take risks. So for instance, sports is a big one in our home. Music was at one point, or leadership roles. If they can take some of the leadership within maybe chores or with something that they want to lead in their sports activity or school activities, we love having those conversations. Another one is label what's underneath. You're pushing back hard. Are you feeling overwhelmed or concerned? What is happening? No, I'm tired. I need space. Whatever that may be. Awesome. Can we label it? Can you express to me what that is? And teach the pause. Role playing pausing before reacting. Not perfect, but powerful over time, right? Just take a moment. I often hear a client that will often say, I'm just giving it space. I can take a deep breath. I don't have to react to this email. I don't have to respond to what they're saying right now. Our kids have a lot of pressure and there's a lot of noise with the cell phones and with the social media. So teaching that pause and being, a little bit loud about, I don't have to respond to that right now and it's okay, right? Yes, we have emergencies, but are these emergencies? Are the flames on fire? If they're not, make sure that you're modeling what that looks like, that it doesn't always look like you're putting out flames all day long. Reward recovery, not perfection. Highlight when they bounce back from a hard moment, even if it started messy. If any of you struggle with perfectionism, you know that oftentimes we put a lot on ourselves, and what would that have looked like to be able to be rewarded, just in that recovery phase of falling, but then getting back up, right? Not giving up. I have been one that has failed many times and have fallen many times, but I'm not giving up. And I didn't learn until I was much, much older how important those falls or what were perceived as failures were. I learned and I grew from those moments even more than the times that I performed perfectly. And so being able to have those conversations and model some of those things are important in vulnerability, but also in showing up in a real space and having real conversations about them and letting our kids learn from those falls and those mistakes and learn how to grow from them, not just sit and sulk in them or not sit and distract ourselves and ignore what's going on underneath. We don't have to parent perfectly. You just have to stay in the process, navigating, like we said, within those window of tolerances and being flexible without being taken advantage of, right? Like we're not going to be submissive when we need to be flexible. We're still going to be accountable. We're still going to hold our kids accountable. We're still going to show up for them, but being able to show up and stay in the process is important. Working on yourself. If you have underlying things that show up when your kids do certain things, that's a you problem, not a them problem. Make sure that you're checking in when you get triggered from their actions or reactions so that you can show up more stable for them, not overreacting or underreacting in those spaces. Have a therapist, have your go-to person, have a safe person, right? Not all of us have the people that we can trust at all times, and that's okay. It's not fortunate, right? But that's okay. Hire your people. Find your people. Get into spaces that are being created or curated for you in this season of life. We go through many seasons of life, and our people that were in one season might not serve us as well in another season. And if you do have those people, lean on them. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask for support. It's one of the most powerful things that we could do is learn how to not try to do all of this on our own and to have a support system. And if this sounds familiar, if you're raising a strong-willed kid or one who's silently cracking under the pressure, I want you to know that you're not alone. Some of those red flags, if your kids are isolating, don't let them isolate too long. If your kids are overreacting, don't let it go on for too long. Setting those boundaries, getting the support that you need to put those boundaries in place, and showing up for yourself consistently so you're not consistently drained is really important. If you're looking for more support in these areas, if you are looking for resources, don't forget about mymentalsummit.com. Ton of resources of how to find therapists or find support or find resources within the community. And also the Elevate membership is there to help you continue to take time for yourself, learn more about yourself to show up in that capacity for you and for your family or your friends. And, we talk about exactly this, how to hold space, respond differently, and raise emotionally aware kiddos without losing yourself in the process. If anything showed up today or stood out, or if anyone listening to this has insight of navigating parenthood, please leave it in the comments. Share it with a friend. Have open conversations because you're not alone in the struggle. And if you don't feel like you're struggling in parenthood, show up for those that might be in a season of need for support and share without judgment, without blame, but with support. I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you gained what you needed to hear today. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about the strength of moving forward. If today's episode resonated with you, take a moment to share it with someone you love, because when we share with love, we help to break the stigma together. If you want to connect with me and learn more about what we're doing over at Mental Summit to break these stigmas, please connect with me over at mymentalsummit.com. Keep showing up, keep growing, keep going together, and remember you're not alone in this.